Was there an Adam? Was there an Eve? Or did we evolve from what we conceived? Either way, we got what we needed when the sun shone down on the Garden of Eden.
Back for the 82nd, count at 82, Grassroots Emergency Election Protection Coalition. I want to welcome our listeners at the Progressive Radio Network on Thursday, 5 p.m. Eastern Time. This conversation is being recorded, so we forswear all the forswear words. We have, as usual, a really packed session dealing with the emergency in our elections. We're going to start with a couple of victories. We like to start with victories. Often they're environmental, and we've got one on the California situation that Ron Leonard and TATANKA BRICCA are going to tell us about. We have some stuff in Arizona that we've won with the great John Brakey reporting in on an amazing victory at the hands of right-wing Republicans defeating Trump Republicans. What could be better? Then we're going to have a major session with the great Jennifer Roberts from the Carter Center on gerrymandering and what is happening, which is really, really interesting, and especially in states like Ohio, Alabama, and North Carolina. We're going to jump in with Hal Ginsberg from Our Revolution. We're going to talk about the attempt to keep treasonous players from this January 6th to be out of office using the 14th Amendment, which was designed specifically to do just that. And then we're going to go into the depths of and with an open-ended conversation with Joel Segal and others on hopefully Lynn Bernstein, if she joins us, on the death threats and the outright fascist assault on our democratic process. Those of the Hebrew persuasion are particularly aware of this, but it's something that Joel is going to be devoting serious time to. We do plan a major press conference, and that will be the open-ended tail end of this beginning conversation, which is jam-packed. So part of our ethos here at the Grassroots Emergency Election Protection Coalition is to stress our victories. And we always like to start with some victories. And we have two really huge victories before we get with Jennifer Roberts on gerrymandering. Ron Leonard and TATANKA BRICCA, can you tell us what's happening with the attempt to kill solar in California?
Yeah, well, I'll lead it off and then I'll turn it over to Ron. Basically, we have a postponement of the California Public Utilities Commission, which gives us time to organize. Go ahead, Ron.
So the point being, this is a opportunity and it's postponed. So it started out Thursday, 1/12, where the commission was going to vote on this proposal NEM3, which is basically a tax that it's so reactive that it basically kills the opportunity of putting solar on your house in California. Then they decided they were going to have another one on 2/10 and 1/27. All of these proposed voting opportunities were postponed. We assume these votes were postponed because of political pressure, pressure on the governor, pressure on the legislature, pressure. And that is the message that I think we're trying to give here. Elon Musk started out the ball rolling. Mark Ruffalo, one of the Hollywood people, got on the ball. Arnold Schwarzenegger had a Times op-ed warning that California is about to take a big step backwards, and Gavin Newsom must have listened because things slowed down rapidly. But
yes, and those of us in the safe energy business know that a postponement is a great thing, especially on this attempt to kill solar. And Wendy, you in Florida are well aware of the battle there. So TATANKA and Ron, you guys are leading the charge. You have a Zoom call, I think, tomorrow night to continue this discussion. And, just like election protection, the parallel fight to get rid of nuclear power and to install solar is absolutely essential. So what time tomorrow? Are you doing your Zoom call tomorrow night, guys? And what time would it be?
7 p.m. Pacific time.
10 o'clock New York time.
and all times in between. So thank you both, you guys. This is a very big deal. I will be writing about it this coming week. And Port Florida, Wendy, you're kind of hanging out there. So we need to win this in Florida as well. But if we win it in California, if we can save rooftop solar in California, it's a huge deal. And my prediction is we're going to win this one. So let's see what happens, okay? Anything else?
Take a look in chat.
Oh, yeah, it's in the chat. The ties to the Zoom call are in the chat. I won't be there. I'm traveling to scenic New Jersey where my daytime temperature will drop about 50 degrees. But, next week I'll be with you guys. Thank you so much. Okay, now we have also won a major one in Arizona on election protection. John Brakey, you're there. The Republicans, the non-Trump Republicans in the legislature have turned back a very serious piece of anti-democratic legislation. You want to tell us about that?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. Is that Rusty Bowers, who is the House Speaker, immediately when they got the bill, and this is the bill that was planning on going ahead and being able to cancel an election. He just removed it. And I'll say this right now, is that there are, Arizona has a very minor majority in the House and Senate. And that makes it very difficult. If they just lose one Republican in the House or Senate, they cannot pass anything. And there are several really principled Republicans in our House and Senate who've had enough. One of them is Karen Fann, who's the president of the Senate. They've had enough. And there's 105 bills that have been proposed, and most of them will never see daylight, just like this bill that Rusty Bowers killed, like I said, who's a speaker. And so they're not going to make it too far. Florida is where I'm really concerned with bad legislation, because they have a major majority of really pretty incredible numbers, that it's just not one vote. They would have to lose in the Senate, the House, maybe 15 votes, or in the House Senate, they would have to lose 6 votes. So what scares me the most?
John, we're going to lose Mayor Jennifer Roberts.
Oh, okay. So John, thank you for that. We'll come back to that later.
One quickie, Harvey, can you tell him to post the names of the people so that we can support their campaign?
Yes, John, will you post their names? In particular, this guy, Rusty, is it Rusty Bowers?
Yeah, I will. I definitely will.
He's the head of the state house, and he voted for Trump, and now he's trying to kill. He's responsible for killing all these anti-democracy bills. Really, really fascinating. Okay, and we have 75 people on the call. We're going to thank you for that, John. We're going to move to the great Jennifer Roberts, who's now at the Carter Center, a 2-term mayor of Charlotte, North Carolina. Without further ado, we know your time is limited, Jennifer. Can you tell us what's going on with gerrymandering?
Absolutely. I can give you an update that just happened in North Carolina on Friday. As you know, you mentioned, North Carolina is one of the 3 states that have had their maps sent back to the literal drawing board. The first court that this lawsuit went to ruled 3-0 that even though it was an extreme partisan gerrymander, they didn't think that they had the power to do anything. Well, the state Supreme Court, in a partisan 4-3 vote, ruled the maps were unconstitutional. And they didn't base it on race. They are racially gerrymandered as well. But that will be a federal issue. The state court said, and I'm reading this because it's very interesting. It said the maps violated beyond a reasonable doubt the state's guarantees of free speech, free assembly, free elections, and equal protection under the law. The General Assembly violates the North Carolina Constitution when it deprives a voter of his or her right to substantially equal voting power on the basis of partisan affiliation. A political map that diminishes or dilutes a voter's opportunity to aggregate with like-minded voters unconstitutionally infringes on that voter's fundamental right to vote. So it's very interesting that they did a broad perspective on what does democracy mean. And democracy means that voters pick their elected officials, not the other way around. The elected officials don't get to pick their voters. The challenge here is they did not give a bright line as to what a fair map would look like. They said it would contain some combination of these metrics to demonstrate a significant likelihood that the districting plan will give the voters of all political parties substantially equal opportunity to elect candidates. What's interesting is, as we look at our country, there was an article in the New York Times. We used to have, 10 years ago, we had 73 competitive congressional seats. Now we're projected to have about 40 out of 435. Republicans are in charge of drawing more than twice as many districts as Democrats this go around. And so we are truly challenged in our democracy. And this is one of the things that Carter Center is looking at. People feel disconnected from voting. They feel that they don't have a say because they've been crammed into a district where they don't really have a voice because they're outnumbered by the other party in ways that they'll never be able to elect someone that has their values. They've looked at those states that have independent commissions, and the results are varied, but they are better than the ones that are partisan. So our General Assembly has until February the 8th to draw new maps. I talked to one of our Democratic legislators, and she said that the Republicans aren't even talking to the Democrats in the General Assembly. They're going back behind their closed doors to try again. Now, a quick history of our balance in North Carolina. We used to have 13 congressional districts. Now we have 14. We gained one. But in those 13, when the Democrats were in charge, it was a 7-6 split. We are a very purple state. We actually have about 400,000 more Democrats registered than Republicans, but it used to be 7-6. After the Republicans took the General Assembly, it went to 10-3, Republican to Democrat. They lost a lawsuit in 2019. So the 2020 elections, we got 8-5. We gained two Democratic seats. The current maps before they were overturned would have ended up with an 11-3 split, Republican to Democrat, even though we have a Democratic governor. And again, we're a very purple state. So this is the tale of gerrymandering and why it hits at the heart of our democracy, because it dissuades people from voting. It's a form of voter suppression. It disconnects people from their elected officials. If you are in, an R+13 state, why do you need to respond to any Democrats who are asking about policy? I've heard this over and over again. When you looked at that horrible law that we had, HB 2, of the people who voted for that, 90% of them had either run uncontested because they were in perfectly safe seats, or they had won by double digits. Again, perfectly safe seats. Why do you need to listen to your constituents? This is the challenge with gerrymandering and democracy. I'm not going to have time to listen to Joel talk about violence, but I want to add two things, because the Carter Center, in its work on supporting our democracy and supporting nonviolent transfer of power, is looking at Georgia, Florida, North Carolina, and Arizona as initial states that are battleground states. In Georgia today, it was either today or yesterday, one of the county commissioners had his law office firebombed. Fulton County. Fulton County is also, by the way, where the DA, as they're prosecuting, looking at Trump and the whole Secretary of State boondoggle there, the DA there has asked for FBI protection. The last thing in terms of violence and voting, we did a forum in Charlotte on Sunday at my church. One of the people who's supposed to speak, an African-American young man who works with an organization called You Can Vote, was stopped by police on the way to this voting education event, wearing a suit. He was handcuffed. Three white police officers took him to the station and said he had to stay overnight unless he paid $615 in cash on the spot. These are the kind of things that are happening in our democracy. And these are the kinds of things that we all need to speak up about, to talk so that people know what's happening and to speak out against them. So I will continue to stay in touch with this terrific group of folks. Any of you who are in Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, or Arizona, I can put you in touch with the Carter Center State Lead. We are trying to get a Republican and a Democrat in each of our states. And we look forward to connecting with any folks who want to help us get the message out about supporting democracy, speaking out against violence, holding candidates and campaigns to a code of ethics, nonviolent, democratic behavior, because it's gotten serious, folks. Thanks.
Listen, Jennifer, we want to have you back with us next week. This is going to be a continuing discussion if you've got time. I want to ask you real quickly on gerrymandering. Is it possible that the Carter Center could help set up a network where we draw up independent bipartisan districts on our own in all the key states, so that when the Republicans or the Democrats, as they're doing in New York, come up with gerrymandered maps, we're not arguing in the abstract. We have an actual map that we can present. What does it, for example, cost to do a neutral map for a state? We have computer programs. We have people who know how to do this. Could we have a GREEP Carter Center independent project to present a good nonpartisan map for every state?
I can certainly ask. I can tell you right now because they're working with Princeton University on an initiative called the Bridging Divides Initiative. And what they're looking at right now is mobilization and incidents of violence, because the greatest concern is that many, there are extremists on both sides, but there are a lot more on the right, that many of them are taking to violence to intimidate voters, to destroy democratic processes, and to even overtake elections, as we all saw on January 6th. So we know they have data on those, on the violent incidents, but I can ask about the drawing the maps.
Well, the reason I bring it up, it was done in Ohio. We passed a resolution in Ohio. I think I still lived in Ohio when the vote was, to have a decent nonpartisan or bipartisan district drawing. And people thought it was going to be really cool. And the Republicans, who have a supermajority, gerrymandered in both houses of the legislature, came in and completely sabotaged it, came up with a worse map than we had before. And it went to the Ohio Supreme Court. And lo and behold, there's a 4-3 Republican majority on the Ohio Supreme Court. One of the Republicans jumped ship and killed the gerrymandered map. So the situation in Ohio is really up for grabs now. And a group stepped forward. I think it's Common Cause. Steve, you can correct me. Stepped forward, and they presented a bipartisan map. And it's really had a huge impact. So I'm wondering if we can set up a national project for people to draw up bipartisan maps totally independent of the government. So that we have, because it would have a lot of...
I'm about to speak. I was going to give you the shout out from about 80 leaders.
Okay, Joel, you're on the phone there. Joel, mute yourself.
Yeah, Common Cause does great work. Absolutely.
Well, if you'll think about this, talk about maybe bringing up at the Carter Center that we could have a national project of independent map making that would set a standard, not only in the Republican states but also in New York, and compare, so that there's something to compare, and then we're not just arguing in the abstract. It's just a thought.
I will ask.
It was done in Ohio with really big impact. And there's,
Harvey,
go ahead. Who was going to jump in?
Oh, Susan Pinchon. I just wanted to quickly, while Jennifer's on the phone, there's something really scary happening in Florida with gerrymandering. And I'm just in a couple sentences, if you don't mind.
Yes.
Ron DeSantis, and I'm not at my desk, so I don't have the exact particulars, but Ron DeSantis, governor, of course, has asked for the Florida Supreme Court to review a couple gerrymandered districts that he's presenting. And nobody could figure out why he would ask for a review ahead of time, because they're so clearly severely gerrymandered. And then what they think he's doing is that the Florida Supreme Court will say, no, this is not okay. And then he's going to appeal it to the Supreme Court of the United States. So I just wanted to mention that because
you've moved, yeah, that I've heard that as well, that many of these legislatures want to appeal to the Supreme Court and get a ruling. So Susan, you're absolutely right.
Jennifer, what's in the off week? We'll get you in touch with the people in Ohio from Common Cause. If anyone else is working, we know that they worked on some districts in Central California. TATANKA has been in touch with the people there, TATANKA, and with Dolores Huerta, where there was some success. You want to real quickly tell Jennifer? Thank you for that, Susan, by the way. Do you want to tell Jennifer real quickly what's going on there?
Lori Passanti, they were very active in the census taking in the Central Valley. And then they were active in each part of the Central Valley in arguing for fair maps. And then they went to the state of Sacramento and they ahead of time drew up the 4 maps that they thought would be fair. And they had no idea, but they were adopted without change. And it resulted in McCarthy getting all the Republicans he wanted and the rest of the areas basically having a more equitable distribution. It gives not just liberals, but progressives a chance to win 3 out of 4 in the Central Valley. It's historic. But the main thing is they went ahead, even though they were confronted by Proud Boys and other violent groups threatening them, and they got the maps in. And then when it came out, they had persuaded and won.
Wow. So we should have a subcommittee on this. And I think a very powerful way to go would be to independently map out the states and present this and present the public with what they should look like. And then if they persist with these gerrymandered states, we can show how the election should have turned out once it's over.
Jennifer, but, I can get you Lori's information if you're interested.
That'd be great.
That'd be great. Jennifer, okay. I'll network you with TATANKA, with Lori, with the people in Ohio. Anybody else working on gerrymandering per se, let's follow this up. And if we can have another conversation next week, Jennifer.
I'll put my email in the chat before I go.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you so much. Anything else, Jennifer?
No, that's it. I think it's terrific. We're doing terrific work, and we just got to keep.
Can I ask one quick follow-up for you, Jennifer, please?
Yes, go ahead, Arthur.
Journalist.
Go ahead.
But not on the record here. But the question is, Eric Holder had an organization that was very dedicated to gerrymandering, was raising money, was getting visible. And to what degree is that still active and functioning? And because he was sort of getting a lot of visibility, I'm glad the Carter Center is doing all this. I hope everyone will learn more and, subscribe to your newsletters. But what's happening with what Holder did and what you guys are doing?
Yeah, absolutely. And his organization is called All on the Line. And they absolutely were very active in North Carolina and several other battleground states. They tried to raise awareness about how bad gerrymandering can be and how it takes away your voice. They got people to draw their own maps about their communities that they didn't want to separate, like they separated Asheville here in North Carolina and split it between 2 districts because it's a very, very blue city, and they made it impossible for them to ever vote for a Democrat. It's Madison Cawthorn's part of the district, by the way. All on the Line is still active. Eric Holder is still active, writing op-eds and communication with people on the ground. Their team is still on the ground here. They were part of the lawsuit. They're part of the, being on talk shows and raising awareness, trying to get people to understand, because gerrymandering is really kind of wonky. So like the average rural farmer in North Carolina doesn't connect with it. So they're very busy working at the grassroots level still. And we'll see. I mean, those stories of people who have been disenfranchised, who haven't been able to vote for years for someone that they, align with, some of those stories could have impact on the courts. So we'll just see. I do think it's raised the awareness in North Carolina so that more people are putting pressure on the General Assembly. We'll see what happens.
It would be interesting. It would be very powerful. I believe this is obviously in one form or another to go to the Supreme Court. If we could present to the Supreme Court 50 states with districts that are drawn the way they should be drawn. And let the Supreme Court say, no, we're going to adopt these completely gerrymandered districts and going to throw out the ones that actually are nonpartisan. I'm sure there are Republicans, especially in places like Arizona, that we could recruit that would participate in a national redistricting project that was bipartisan and made sense. Just something to think about. So we'll work on this through the week. Anybody, please sign up with Mike. If you can keep track of all this, we'll bring in PDA, and maybe it'll be a project that comes to fruition, just like the Georgia Way. Thank you so much, Jennifer Roberts. Always great to have you on. And,
Thanks much.
We'll give you a full report on the report on violence in our election.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll try to listen to the recording.
Okay, we appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor Roberts.
All right.
See you next week.
Take care.
Okay. I've got two hands, and then we want to go. Someone on the call has been working on the 14th Amendment aspect to people who are running for office who were at January 6th, which is in violation of the 14th Amendment. Real quickly, I want to, Alex Williams, you had a hand, and then Jerry Toby. Alex Williams?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead real quick, please.
Okay, first, I just want to mention about, there's a kind of a dilemma in New York where this gerrymandering thing is happening too, but it's in favor of the Democrats. And part of it is wanting to be fair, but also we need to pick up Democratic seats. So what do you do about that? And then
we're a nonpartisan call.
Right.
We want fair seats. So, we're opposed to gerrymandering, on either side.
That's what I was thinking. But my bigger thing is the solution is expanding the size of the House of Representatives. I've been looking into that, and that would be it was kind of like the silver bullet. It only would take Congress to do it. Well, you need the Senate too. You don't have to have a constitutional amendment, because up until 1929, I think, or 1920s, it was increased with the population, but they've stopped doing it. And so we've frozen in time with the 435 representatives. If we had more representatives, we would have smaller districts. People would be in closer touch to the people, and it'd be less ability to gerrymander. And nobody would lose votes. No states would lose votes, or very little.
Well, that's interesting. I like that idea. They'd have to have smaller seats. You'd have to have skinnier people in the House in order to fit into the building. But
they can rebuild. They can expand it.
Yeah. No, that's not a point I've heard raised, and it's a very interesting one. Thank you for that, Alex. Appreciate that. Is there anything else you wanted to put in? Okay, that's good. Jerry Toby, and then we're going to move on. We're going to talk about the movement to enforce the 14th Amendment on traitors like Madison Cawthorn. Jerry Toby.
I put in to the chat 2 links to redistricting map apps and one from 538 about how maps are currently proposed.
Oh, okay, very good. Thank you for that. Much appreciated. Okay, we have 88 people on the call. Is Hal Ginsberg on the call? Hal Ginsberg, I don't see you listed. Mike, you said Hal Ginsberg was to come on if you have awareness of him. Also, we have a group that's talking about enforcing the 14th Amendment on people who are running for office, like Madison Cawthorn, who committed treason. Is anybody on to talk about that? Did we have someone in particular? I think we were supposed to schedule someone who was going to talk specifically about that movement. Is that person on?
I'm not seeing
If not, I will explain it. I see Marilyn Bernstein has joined us. Lynn, you're in South Carolina, right? Marilyn Bernstein? Marilyn, Lynn Bernstein?
No,
if you'll unmute, that would be great.
No, I'm not the one I'm in Massachusetts.
Okay,
There's
you're the other Lynn Bernstein. Okay, very good.
Bernsteins, much too many of us.
No, there's not enough of you. We need more Marilyn Bernstein's like you. So let's talk about this. The 14th Amendment was passed after the Civil War. It's the longest amendment. It was meant to guarantee the rights of freed Black people in the South, but it was very complicated. It is a very complicated piece of legislation, and it's actually been used to guarantee corporate personhood, because somewhere in the 1880s, a clerk of the U.S. Supreme Court decided that the justices of the Supreme Court, loosely defined, had discussed a corporate case. It was a railroad case, and had referred to corporations as persons. This dates back to the 1880s. It's the root of the horrible Citizens United decision. But there is language in the 14th Amendment that basically says, if you have rebelled against the government of the United States of America, specifically, they were talking about the Confederacy, but the language carries over to today, and there is now a movement in North Carolina in particular, referring to Madison Cawthorn, who Jennifer talked about, is one of the people involved in one of the gerrymandered districts. And he is technically, under the 14th Amendment, should be ineligible for elected office as under the 14th Amendment. So there is a movement going on to disqualify him for running from Congress, and that should apply to anyone who participated in the January 6th rebellion, insurrection, from running for office. So I wanted to update you on that. I don't know if anybody on the call is specifically working on that, but it is something that we need to keep tabs on. Okay? Did anyone want to comment on that? And then we'll move ahead. Okay. We also, Mike, has Hal Ginsberg joined us from our revolution?
I'm still chasing him around.
Okay. So Hal Ginsberg is also part of a movement from our revolution to deal with various issues that we were going to discuss today. If he turns up, we will get to him as well. I now want to go to Joel Segal. Joel, you with us? My co-convener here, Joel Segal.
Hello, Harvey.
All right, Joel. So you have people. This is expected to be a pretty lively debate. You have a discussion, and we were hoping for Lynn Bernstein to come on from North Carolina. She's been hesitant to talk. She has experienced direct intimidation and threats. John Brakey knows a bit about it, and we'll talk to John about this as well. Certainly going on in Arizona, certainly in other states around the country, not only in terms of election boards, but also school boards. And Joel, here, Hal Ginsberg has just joined us, but we're going to jump in now, and we'll get to Hal at the tail end. So I'm sure Hal has conversations on this as well. Joel, give us some insights on your thinking. You want to do a national press conference. We have Eileen Proctor on the line, our great PR person, who is going to be setting up a national press conference with you on this. Let's have your thoughts on the rise of fascism and all these violent threats that are happening, and people, I'm sure you're going to want to join in.
Thank you, Slug. I want to welcome also Francis Ngoy, originally from Congo, now living here in America, who is the deputy campaign director of the Bring America Home Now movement to end homelessness. But he's also very, very involved nationally on getting young people to be involved in voter suppression. So welcome, Brother Francis. Yes, as one quick point, what I'm realizing is if we're going to be successful in addressing, reforming, gerrymandering, eliminating the Electoral College, address voter suppression laws, we can't do anything substantive unless we professionalize this movement. So you've had people like John Brakey and many others who've been literally you need to smile there, Brakey, who've been the pioneers of this movement. Harvey Wasserman, one of the pioneers of this movement. But the reason why the far right-wing Republicans are winning is they out organized, outfunded, and outthought us. It was mainly Karl Rove, who was the evil genius behind gerrymandering. And that's something that we really, at some point, are going to have to talk about, and which leads me to my next point. This weekend, I'm watching MSNBC. Newsflash, Republican Party released a statement that the January 6th insurrection was a legitimate act of freedom of expression. Now, Brother Sluggo and all my colleagues on here, in my lifetime, I have never seen anything like this, where the Republican Party basically stated, we are now white nationalists, we are authoritarians, we don't care about democracy, and we're going to go ahead and change history by saying that it never existed. And then we're going to repeat the lie over and over again until people believe it. What are the two lies? Biden lost, the election was stolen. Second lie, January 6th was a time of love, camaraderie, almost like Woodstock. In order to deal with legitimized fascism and legitimized Jim Crow, it's gone mainstream. When hate goes mainstream, that's when Nazi regimes and fascist regimes, whether it was Pinochet in Chile or, Stalin, I can go on and on. And it was because people were quiet and people allowed it to happen. As a Jewish person, I am telling you, I lost half my family in the Holocaust. As a Jewish person, we grow up, Mike HERSH, you know what I'm talking about. We grow up with a consciousness that it could happen here. It is happening here. And that's fascism, white nationalism, and Nazism. They passed a law in Texas where if you teach Holocaust studies, you must give the opposing view. My dead family don't have an opposing view because there is no opposing view. Republican Party is now promulgating policies based on white nationalist Nazism. Dangerous. Voter suppression laws being passed. Dangerous. January 6th being now a celebratory event by the entire Republican Party. No, no, no. We're going to have a press conference. It'll be in a few weeks. We are going to bring in interfaith leaders, celebrities, dignitaries, activists, elected officials, and we're going to call for that the Biden administration, that Congress, that state legislators, that civil society get up, get active, fight back, and speak out because it's too quiet. And I'm worried. We're going to do these press conferences probably once a month until we start seeing action. I'll close by saying the following. I used to work on the House Judiciary Committee for many, many years, 13 years, for the chair, John Conyers. What I found in Congress most of the time was if they were not pressured by the grassroots, they would not do anything bold or progressive. And Mike knows all this because he used to see me being a little guerrilla warfare fighter up there, trying to get stuff done when people didn't want it to happen. We can't be quiet. That's all I'm going to say. I hope there will be a law that will be introduced in the Judiciary Committee, a bill that outlaws the Klan, outlaws the Nazi Party, outlaws white nationalists. Because do you think we would would ISIS be allowed to organize and have meetings? No. We cannot allow the tyranny of the minority of the majority because they don't have the right to speak freely. The First Amendment doesn't guarantee everyone's speech. There's limitations. Thank you. I'm a little emotional.
Well, you may not be emotional enough. Do people want to jump in and second what you got to say here? I mean, to me, it's incredibly powerful and important. Eileen Proctor is on the line. She's going to be organizing these press conferences. We have 88 people with us. The question is, what do we do about this? We do have many, many, many reports now of death threats, of being leveled at members of school boards and of people who are on election boards. And we have this wave of, they're not technically book burnings, but that's what they really are. We're having books removed from libraries, including a very important book about the Holocaust called Maus, M-A-U-S, which I read 30 years ago, which is an incredibly powerful book. But without standing around outside with bonfires, the right wing in this country is doing what the Nazis did to written materials. And there's a very important quote. No one should ever forget this quote. People who begin by burning books end by burning people. And that's exactly what's going on now. As someone who's coming out with a history of the United States that's bound to be inflammatory, I'm very well aware in the first person of what's going on. Having published 20 books, I would bet you that 18 or 19 would not pass muster, at least. I wrote a poem about the passing of my parents. That might get through, except it's a Buddhist book. So, Joel's 100% right. We're right in the middle of it now. And as an election protection organization or sounding board or network, this is what we need to deal with. Justin LeBlanc, you always have interesting comments. Go right ahead, and then Robert Sullivan.
Sure. Following up on your rhetoric, I'll say that a famous philosopher once said, "He who is without sin cast the first stone." And I'd add to that corollary, he who wants to burn books should start by burning his own instead of someone else's. But specifically here, actually, the way to go after these kinds of things isn't necessarily directly to block meetings. It's to go after tax evaders, kind of like we did for Al Capone back in the day. And the particular area that this seems to be a big deal right now is in the stock market and in the cryptocurrencies, even these fake trading cards called NFTs. People are actually using those to deduct their business expenses to avoid taxes by using fake digital currencies as art. Right.
Well, for all these fundamentalist Christians, it seems like the number one sin in modern evangelical Christianity is paying taxes, but that's another story. But this wave of violence, we're seeing. I heard on NPR an absolutely terrifying report from a guy on a school board who was the deciding vote in a controversial issue, and he was completely flooded with death threats to him, to his family. I mean, this is not acceptable. This is not how a democratic society works. Robert Sullivan, thank you for that, Justin. Robert Sullivan.
Sluggo, real quick, I just wanted to say, back on the eve of the 2020 election, this group had 2020 vision, and we held a press conference where we warned that the Trump Republicans were not going to accept a loss at the polls. They were going to do something in retaliation if they lost. And we were right about that. We thought it would be immediately after the results were announced, but they were a little bit more clever than that, and they waited till January 6th. So we were a little bit ahead of our time, but we're going to put together a series of press conferences to sound the alarm because nobody else is doing it.
No, and we need people who are being threatened to come forward. That's a big ask, but we are hearing from some of them. Robert Sullivan, and then Joel again, and then Ruth Strauss.
Well, I'm going to refer to that coming forward. People like myself who have sat in the background, we're shaken when we see what our neighbors are doing. And I myself have decided this year has got to be the time for me to come out to speak, even to people, even to my family. I can't let it go any longer. And I think if all of us do that, if all of us speak out as we must, we may be able to make a difference.
And where are you, Robert? You're in New Orleans, right? Okay. Thank you so much for that. Much appreciated. Joel Segal and then Ruth Strauss.
Serendipitous. I was going to say that we have to have interfaith leaders speaking out. They've been conspicuously very silent. Well, why is that? Because let's say you live in the South, you're a minister or even a rabbi, and you have congregants who maybe Trump Republicans, they're afraid often to speak out because they're afraid they're going to lose their job. Robert, am I correct? Yes, sir. All right. So we have to find the interfaith leaders who don't have anything to worry about to join us in our press conference. So, Robert, I wanted to thank you. I hope we'll be able to touch base, so maybe we can talk about who those faith leaders might be. Last point I wanted to make is, Justin, I think there's going to have to be something similar to what the FBI did. Like you saw the movie Mississippi Burning, where the FBI infiltrated KKK cells and used a very sophisticated strategy to start busting up some of those cells before the violence actually happened. Sadly, I can't really trust the Congress because I don't know what's about to happen to the Congress, but I guarantee you what probably is going to happen is if it goes Republican, they're not going to support the kind of things that we're talking about. What we got to do now is work on both levels. Have the FBI funded at the highest levels to target hate groups. Number two, pass legislation to ban their gatherings, their promulgation of hate that they espouse on Facebook, Twitter, and every other account before it's too late. And I really wish that in Germany, I wish they had outlawed the Nazi Party and kept Hitler in jail for a longer period of time. I think it was a big mistake. You can't always worry about the ACLU and freedom of speech and what's the backlash. We're fighting domestic terrorism. You cannot do that without passing laws to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel. Ruth Strauss and then John Brakey. Ruth and then John. Ruth, you're from Alabama.
Right? Oh, yeah.
And
do I have some hot news, hot off the press? The effing Supreme Court, and that effing stands for foreboding. Anyway, the effing Supreme Court has just overturned the court decision in Alabama, which was very surprising, which said that they had to redraw the districts so that they would be fair to Black voters in Alabama. And I was amazed that Alabama court did that, but they did it. And now the Supreme Court has overturned it. So they are showing their true colors once again.
So the U.S. Supreme Court has said that the Alabama Supreme Court cannot throw out a gerrymandered map? Ruth, is that the understanding?
Correct. And that is just brand new, Washington Post alert.
Wow. That's terrifying. That is really bad news. Horrifying.
Okay.
Thank you for that. Thank you for keeping us updated. John Brakey, then Mila, and then Tatanka.
Thank you, Harvey. I just want to quickly go into the fact that we do have to get involved. We do have to talk to our families who are Republicans. That was the technique that I used very heavily, waiting until after the January 6th event. In fact, I waited till after Trump had left office before I engaged. And then I started doing Republican and right-wing shows and built a relationship with the broadcaster. And I was able to convert a lot of people, but I kept my talk very, very focused. I would not talk about anything other than elections, because if we went into other things, it would get nasty. And I want to say this is that, during the audit, I was assaulted twice there, okay, by the mega people who are really just gonzo, okay? But I was able to convert a lot of people by just having dialogue, because when we don't have that dialogue, we allow grifters to get in there who are hustlers and convert these people to think. So it is important to engage. And sometimes engaging, when I did, you couldn't believe that I was getting incredible hate mail from Democrats because I went in. And it was the best decision I made, going in and engaging and then working with all different people in the media and helping things happen. So the key is engaging. And right now, because of the the virus. We're not seeing people like we used to. We've gone more tribal. And that is also part of the problem, that we're not mixing around the coffee pot at work or whatever, at a bar, or whatever it takes to engage with people. Anyway.
I've got to say that the Arizona Republicans have been really interesting. This guy, Rusty Bowers, as I say, there was a piece on him in the New York Times people should look at. He was a Goldwater Republican. He supported Trump in 2020, and now he's killing the Trump attempt to destroy the elections in Arizona. Very, very interesting. And John, you're a better man than I am. You have a lot more patience than I do to be able to talk to people, but good for you, man. More power to you. Thank you.
Just to add to it, it's so bizarre that if the right says left, the left will say right. In Florida, we're working with Democrats. They're my plaintiffs. In Arizona, I will be working with Democrats. Right now, I'm working with Republicans. We have 4 bills going in, right? 3 already established, a 4th one to get us a ballot library to make elections transparent, trackable, and publicly verified. It looks like all the 3 of the first 3 bills, the 4th one with the ballot library was launched today, which today is the cutoff in Arizona for any new bills.
Beautiful, beautiful. Marla, then Tatanka.
Hey, thank you, Harvey. I just wanted to comment on this bleeding heart liberal catch and release policy with fascists, that somehow we can let them go. And then just like other fascists have returned, that happened in Spain as well. Franco was arrested and then he was allowed to leave, and then he came back and took over. So just wanted to emphasize that point. I got to tell you, I was so disturbed by the news that Ruth just broke here on the grassroots election protection call that I, for a second there, I lost my train of thought. It was Joel who had been talking about that, but catch and release fascists, I think, is a very bad idea.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we should all think about what would have happened to the January 6th infiltration of the Capitol if those people had been Black. Just think about that for a minute. How many of them would have gotten past the first step? Tatanka and then Hal Ginsberg.
In response to Joel starting this topic and everybody's response to that, I just want to see this continued. We need to spark a mass nonviolent national movement in the face of this. And that means using all the nonviolent tools at our disposal. So I don't, if we were talking months ago when Biden came in, we had so many other expectations about the restoration of civil rights bills, about, appointing a larger Supreme Court that would, reflect our values, et cetera, which is desperately needed. But in the face of the present situation and the Republican Party totally, captured by big oil and is now constitutes essentially a terrorist party in our country, we need to we need to get our heads together around this, and just raising the issue this time won't do it. So I just am saying, Harvey, I'd love to have this be on the agenda next week as well.
Yes, absolutely. And Eileen Proctor is on. She's going to be setting up the press conference. Tatanka, of course, we would want you to, with the Romero Institute, to work with Joel on the press conference with Joel and Eileen. And what's frightening to me, among the many, is the obvious comatose response of the Democratic Party. I mean, where are they? Is there a there? This was a big problem in Germany when Hitler rose. There was a weak opposition, and the Weimar Democrats, and they just rolled over and went to sleep, just like Obama did in 2010 when the Koch brothers, choreographed by Karl Rove, staged the Red Map coup and took over the state legislatures in the country, and through gerrymandering. And Obama got up and, in his inimitable fashion, said, well, we took a real shellacking, and that's the last we heard. And Democrats have done absolutely nothing. Even in the last 12 years, they're still yelling at Ralph Nader from 2000, for God's sakes. So, this is a serious problem. We're not getting any help from the Democratic Party. And it's very, very, I don't have to tell you, it's disturbing. So, Tatanka, I hope you'll hook up with Joel and Eileen and become a major part of this effort, along with everybody else. Hal Ginsberg, you're new. You've been brought in by Mike HERSH. We look forward to talking to you. Hal?
Thank you so much. And I do want to thank Mike HERSH for inviting me to this event. And I also want to just say that at Our Revolution, we greatly value our relationship with PDA. We have worked closely over the years with the Progressive Democrats of America, and it has been, I believe, a mutually rewarding relationship, and also one that has, hope, has led to some benefits for some of the folks that we've reached out to. So I first want to say that. Second, I do want to point out, or just let folks know if they don't already, that we are working closely at Our Revolution with an organization called Free Speech for People. It is a nonprofit law firm that is fighting for justice, and we are working with them to keep the insurrectionists off the ballot pursuant to the U.S. Constitution. If you swear an oath to office and then you engage in insurrection, rebellion against the United States government, or you give aid and comfort to our government, our country's, our nation's enemies, then you are banned from holding office, and that is at a state or a federal level, because the oath that local officials swear to is also to the U.S. government, is to the U.S. Constitution. So they violated that. And we're working, especially we actually had a rally this morning in Los Angeles. And we're going to be in Florida, Georgia, Maryland. If you want to join us, I put some links in the chat, or just reach out to me either through Mike or just Hal at ourrevolution.com. So we're very excited about this, and there's been a very positive response. Before I give up the mic, since I've got your attention for just a moment, I want to commend, I believe, John Brakey for what he said. Very important to talk to folks, also to listen. The Republican Party is definitely our enemy, and its leadership is incredibly problematic. But their voters are folks, some of whom we can reach. And in fact, John has said he has reached them. There is so much injustice, there is so much unfairness, and many Republican voters are victims of that as well. And we have to recognize that our party, if we're Democrats, has often not stood up for those poor, struggling, and working class voters. We've got to, if the Democrat Party doesn't, then we will be looking at fascism, because people are not going to vote for a party that doesn't appeal to their worst instincts, but doesn't also appeal to their best instincts. And sadly, I think that's where we are right now with the Democrats. Thank you for your time. Thank you for listening, and hopefully for your support.
I want to keep you a minute, Hal, if you don't mind. Can you explain to us in a little more detail the role of the 14th Amendment and your legal grounds for opposing the candidacies of people like Madison Cawthorn? What specifically are you arguing in terms of their right or lack thereof to hold elected office in this country?
All right, so let me just quickly, I'm going to call up the section that we're talking about. It's the 14th Amendment, Section 3 of the Constitution. So I didn't have it at my disposal, but I'll just read it. It's brief. No person shall be a senator or representative in Congress or elector president or vice president or hold any office, civil or military, under the U.S. or any state who having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress or officer of the United States or any state legislature or executive or judicial officer of any state. So basically anybody who is in elective office or elected office, or who had previously been in elected office and swore to support the Constitution. Any such person who engages in insurrection or rebellion against the U.S. or who gives aid or comfort to the enemies is banned, may not serve as a federal or state in federal or state office. I mean, I don't know how clear that was. Let me post it because I don't want to go on and on about it and bore
No,
people.
but we need to have clarification on this. This is a big deal. And of course, it goes right to the top. Just listening to it, you say, well, that's Donald Trump.
Yes.
But so you are asserting, and I'm assuming you have constitutional lawyers, you are assuming that from Donald Trump down to Madison Cawthorn, down to, whatever MAGA nutcase went into the Congress on that day, that they are legally disqualified from holding office under the Constitution of the United States? Is that what you're asserting?
Well, if that MAGA nutcase had been had sworn an oath to uphold the U.S. Constitution, yes. If not, if they were simply a citizen who had never previously been elected, then the 14th Amendment does not apply. It only applies to people who either were serving in elected office at the time of the insurrection and participated in it, or had previously served in elected office and were no longer at the time. But somebody who was never elected would not be barred under the 14th Amendment.
Was there an Adam? Was there an Eve? Or did we evolve from what we conceived? Either way, we got what we needed when the sun shone down on the Garden of Eden.